Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where today we're going to be continuing our little story on New Capenna. Of course, this time around, we're actually going to have Joe with us. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Yeah, it's fantastic. He survived the concrete boots and the sleeping with the fishes and all of this stuff. It was just him joeing around.
Now the card is smaller.
Yes, that's true. The card is smaller. So basically, what we had was a secret special sixth, thing show up called a Garden of Flesh, and it was it's such a good story. And basically, unlike all the other New Capenna stories, this one does not take place on New Capenna. This is actually explaining Urabrask what he was saying earlier in the story. So I'm just going to kind of explain what happens as it's presented, and we're going to go through it. And I'm going to talk about Joe. Let me just get this across as easily as I can. The way things are worded in this story, it's all from Elesh Norn's perspective.
That already sounds interesting enough.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So the mother of machines, how she views everything. So, she says here, this is how it opens. Here in the machine orthodoxy, there is perfection. Here, there is blessing. And so it's just Elesh Norn in a thing called the Fair Basilica, and she's standing there under this light, and her machine orthodoxy, her congregation, her cult is all around her, and she describes them as pure and infallible, and the pure, everything about them is undeniable as her own glistening oil. And she's holding this person, like a mirroring person. And as she's looking at them, she can see that they have this attribute that she can't quite recognize. The way that it's described is she has this dark hair and this an olive skin kind of thing. She doesn't quite understand what she is, or why she's why this person is awakening this thoughts inside of her. And they talk about the squareness of her jaw and things that basically go at the edge of her memory. And it's awesome just seeing how she looks at the Vat Priest. She talks about the Splicers. It's just name dropping all of these little bits and bobs of Elesh Norn's world, of the entirety of New Phyrexia. And so cool. It's very cool. So what she does is she has her claws around this Mirren, right? Mm-hmm. And she goes and she cuts her wrist, and she allows the oil essentially to go out of her and slowly slide into this person, into the wounds of the human. And it talks about how she does it. She's watching everything slowly start to enter into the person, into the Mirren, and start to corrupt her, or she says purify her. And she's preaching the entire time. And here it says that the crowd swayed forward as one, their eyes glinting as they watched the oil flow from the wound and onto the Mirren's head and quaking shoulders. It slicked her hair, coating the back of her neck. She thrashed when it penetrated the wound there and screamed, the sound shrill and organic, irritating. Soon, those vocal cords would be replaced and immaculately calibrated. Her voice would join the others in reverence. She sputtered and choked as the glistening oil smothered her, filled her, her body twitching as the oil began to flow from her gaping mouth and the corners of her eyes. She held the mirror up from the scruff for all to see. Behold, perfection. Yeah.
That's haunting.
It's so good. The fact that, again, it's from her perspective. So that's the feeling of all of that is exactly what perfection looks like to Elesh Norn. Things get worse. But in her grip, the Mirren shuddered, an organic movement that bubbled up from the center of her body in sudden uneven waves. There was nothing mechanical about it, no measured rhythm or sacred alteration. Instead, the meat beneath Norn's hand bulged. It rolled and squirmed as if the bony vertebra knuckling against her palm were trying to shove her away. The Mirren's body heaved, a convulsion so violent Norn nearly dropped her, and a pulpy cord of organic material, a fibrous wooden root, sinuous and alien, burst from the human's belly. Blood, unnaturally thick and foul, oozed onto the dais. It pulled beneath Norn's feet, a twisted abomination of her own glistening oil, even as more roots bulged from the human's open mouth, wrenching teeth and tongue aside, breaking through her eye socket and squirming into the air.
Before we continue, it's not a baby xenomorph, right?
No, it's not a baby xenomorph.
That feels like what she started describing at the beginning, so it's just like...
I know. And as I was reading it, I was like, what is happening? And obviously, this is the next part. Elesh Norn was perplexed.
I'm sure she was.
And it says that it took a moment for her to react, but then, like with a snap decision, her porcelain armor, she turned one piece on her arm essentially into a blade and sliced the Mirren's throat, and the lifeless body crumpled at her feet. Just a pile of unnatural roots, blood, and offal. And there was no sign of a change or machinery. Only unnatural corruption.
Death.
Yeah. And she says that Elesh Norn hears the Phyrexian chants falter. And so she's basically had to try and spin it in front of her crowd. She goes, "Witness this example and pity her," she said in her calm voice. "She was a vessel so corrupt not even our glistening oil could save her. Here is proof that we must spread our doctrine swiftly so that all can be saved." And it's cool is because it talks about how Elesh Norn is trying to compose herself. So the mother of machines, the top of the Phyrexian food chain, is struggling to understand what just happened, because the glistening oil has never failed like that before. And so as it's going through, it's talking about how there's these inky black banners, the cold silver white of everything, and she's going through her courtyard, kind of just going, and she can't stop thinking about what happened with that Mirren woman. She left pretty much immediately because she didn't feel like it, but now she's back in the basilica. Yeah. She's working through everything and none of it makes sense, because the oil is supposed to be a holy element, as she describes it. Its grace is self-evident. So there should not be a human that has ever been powerful enough to resist the glistening oil themselves. So what does that mean? Like, what's happening? Do you have any theories, Joe?
I don't know, but the way you described the woman, it sounded like she looked like Elspeth.
She did look like Elspeth.
So is that why she's afraid of Elspeth?
Possibly. Let's keep going.
Is it Norn racist? People that look like this are immune to oil?
Phyrexians hate this one trick. So this is Elesh Norn walks across the courtyard. The distant hum of Phyrexian prayer is the only sound to accompany her measured footsteps. She ran one long finger over the lip of the dais. She thought to ascend the steps to revisit the place the Mirren had collapsed and attempt to determine what might have caused the disruption, when she noticed a small blemish on the flagstones. She pauses. Where the Mirren's blood had fallen on the dais, there was a small, inky weed sprouting through a crack in the flagstones. Its stalk twisted, a mottled jumble of greens and browns. Fully organic, hideous, offensive. So obviously she reaches down, she takes out the weed, right? But when she reaches for it, it's slick. And because she was just gonna pull out a plant, so she was ripping it differently, and when she pulled on it, it felt like skin. And if you've ever seen Elesh Norn's card, she does not like skin. Her entire deal is replacing flesh, which is corruptible, with porcelain, which is perfect, and just, I mean, it's porcelain.
Like the porcelain legionnaire.
Exactly. So, yeah, she tries to take it out. It doesn't work. So she twists her wrist and uproots it, and it's like she's just hearsay because she can't get it out, but she eventually does pull it out, and then there's no roots. Do you know why that is, Joe? Because at the end of it is a human forearm that had been gripping the ground, essentially. And it's disproportionately large, half rotten, and the bone swings like a clapper of a cracked bell in the dislocated slop. Its limp fingers are splayed wide as if still reaching toward the very soil she had plucked it from. Abomination. It made no sense. And so she just throws the weed like, that was gross. Ew, human flesh. And so she's trying to figure out exactly what's happening. And it says an unfamiliar tightness coiled deep in Elesh Norn's belly. And so she's going and she starts seeing there are other weeds everywhere across the courtyard that have sprouted up.
Is Elesh Norn having a nightmare, or are we seeing the plane adapting?
We're using... Find...
Like, that would be an interesting theory, like using all of the dead bodies to create new life, since there's no life left on the plane.
Here are some of the things that were at the end of these weeds. A heart, arteries drooping away from it, a bulging strand of spongy intestine, a single kidney, an ear, a dozen teeth impossibly strung together like jagged pearls. And it's crazy how it describes how she's just going through all of this stuff, and it talks about a jitteriness spreading through her limbs, and she thinks, could it be a malfunction? Could she be malfunctioning? Because the only thing that had affected the Mirren was her own glistening oil. So it's possible that it's Elesh Norn herself, she's realizing, that is the corrupted one. That something is wrong with her. And her hands are just drenched in human blood as she's doing this. And she's like, she hates it. She absolutely hates it. And she says, we are the mother of machines. And she's realizing that if like whatever's happening, she can't let that, like the effect she's feeling radiate out to the others, because they have a hive mind. All the ones in the machine orthodoxy feel whatever she feels. So that radiation, she doesn't want it to hit them, essentially. And so she's suppressing it and trying to push it down. And I am kind of skipping over, like, this is a great story. You need to read it so you can see everything. And it says, this place was nothing if not an extension of herself, the basilica. And then she looks down the plaza, and every cavity she had cleared of organic atrocities, every place the Mirren's blood had stained, was full of new weeds sprouting. They pulse and grow, overrunning the fair basilica like a garden of flesh. And now she's running, tearing these things apart. And there's a tower where a leg just popped out of the flagstones. And it's just all of this madness. And it felt as though that her basilica was rotting in ways a machine wouldn't, putrefying from the ground up. She says it's intolerable. No, it is impossible. And she looks around trying to figure out what's going on. And I will say, up until this point, she's been trying to figure out what's going on, and she looks around and thinks, this feels like a nightmare. But Phyrexians don't dream. Phyrexian minds are anchored in reality, the predictable rhythm of machinery and righteousness. That's why, remember with Urabrask, how he was like, then make them ready. In that earlier story, he didn't understand the idea of a person not having that like autonomy or having that thing. So he was anchored in reality. The metaphor didn't make sense to him. Subconscious space. There was no reason for her mind to have wandered into a fanciful subconscious space full of plans, fleshy horrors, and logical assumptions. But she stood her body taut, her mind trying to make sense of an improbable reality. She felt as though she was trapped like those sleeping humans had been, as if all would be right with the world if only she could wake up and think clearly again. She was thinking about the fact that there were humans who recently had been showing up with horrendous nightmares. And so she's still, and she's trying not to breathe, and her armor is motionless, and she's looking around, and she realizes this world is not hers. What is the next thing she says, Joe?
I don't know.
Ashiok.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. Ashiok. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's... wow.
Yeah. She looks up at one of her towers, and on top of it, Ashiok is just standing there. Ashiok, Planeswalker, Nightmare Mage. She had heard of them, of course. Norn was not unfamiliar with the chaos Ashiok had inflicted on the Mirrans, how the Nightmare Mage often infected lesser minds with dreams of their own amusement to induce fear. But she had never considered Ashiok would be so foolish as to attempt to impose their nightmarish art upon her. It's like, oh snap, we're going to see a good fight. Because remember, this is Elesh Norn's dream, essentially.
Uh-huh.
But this is also Ashiok's playground.
Dreams in general.
Yeah, exactly. So then she says Ashiok's name again, this time looking directly at Ashiok. This abomination, this filth is your doing. And Ashiok says, beautiful, isn't it? I worked so very long on this particular masterpiece. Your mind is a very unique canvas, Elesh Norn. Very unique indeed. To be completely honest, I was not certain Phyrexians would be suitable for my art. One simply cannot create a masterpiece without a proper canvas. So basically, Norn realizes this was a test. Ashiok went to the toughest, strongest Phyrexian, both physically and mentally, and tested them. Like, they're the control, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, in addition to all the other stuff happening inside of Elesh Norn's soul, essentially, or whatever passes for his soul, is fury and fear. But here's the problem. We are a regent of Phyrexia. We are perfection personified. We do not fear. And as she says, she doesn't even believe it. But she says she was not made entirely of organic material. She is not weak. She is not flesh. She is not human. And as she's saying all that, Ashiok just smiles at Elesh and starts gliding in a circle around Norn, like skimming the earth. And Ashiok basically explains, if you weren't afraid of things, I wouldn't be here.
That's amazing.
It is. And so as Ashiok says that, Ashiok's horns, you know how they have the horns? The smoke starts coming out of it. Yeah, like the face that doesn't finish. And it's just kind of those two head.
Don't try to talk to me about Ashiok's anatomy. I can't tell what's there.
That's kind of the point. But yeah, basically that cavernous emptiness, the smoke starts pouring out of it. And everything starts to get even worse. Because Norn looks at the flagstones, and there's a human head growing through a broad crack like a fungus. A female with dark hair and light skin. White armor growing up around her chin and jaws like fronds. Her features become covered in mire, but beneath the filth, she can see something familiar. I first encountered her when I was creating my art in Theros. Her name is Elspeth Tyrell. She caught my attention and I sought her out in the underworld. Her fear of Phyrexians is glorious, simply breathtaking. How could my curiosity not have been piqued? What kind of artist would I be if I did not seek out such an opportunity to hone my craft, to test it on a being such as yourself? I simply had to find out what would a Phyrexian nightmare be like. And as this is the best part, Elspeth escaped, didn't she? This small, inconsequential human escaped the machine orthodoxy. And Norn is like getting angrier and angrier by the second. Irrelevant. The truths we see are beyond your understanding, Ashiok. We will not be cowed. We will not be a tool for your art. And even as like this is happening, there's this. She's trying to reach out essentially to her people. So instead of letting that fear overtake her, Elesh Norn, she is reaching into the minds of Phyrexians everywhere, trying to pull them into her dream, essentially, their minds into the dream. Because she knows she has thousands and thousands of these people. And as this happens, Ashiok basically feels it, and their smile falters. And Norn tells them, we will not abide this blasphemy any longer. And then suddenly, all of these Phyrexians materialize in the dream. And Ashiok looks around like, trouble. Yeah, Ashiok's like, they're not part of this piece. I did not design them to be here, not now. We are one. Did you think you could easily control us with this nightmare? And there's just this, it describes it as a beat of silence. All machinery still. The grinding of gears and the wet sounds of Ashiok's nightmare garden ceased. Only wind carrying the smell of decay and oil snapping the crimson banners high overhead. You have underestimated us. And all the Phyrexians around her repeat, you have underestimated us.
That's...
Ashiok's response, interesting. So what follows is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's a fantastic fight where basically Ashiok is conjuring all these nightmares and Elesh is sending her goons to attack them. But at the same time this is happening, Elesh Norn is having to deal with Elspeth. Because Elspeth is basically covered in Elesh Norn's armor and become an impure, imperfect, impossible reflection of Elesh Norn.
Would love to see an art of that.
I know. That would be so cool. As an alternate art for maybe the one that escapes, I feel like that'd be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And it describes her, a form clothed in her own white metal and crimson robe, still covered in human flesh. Dead. And this is no, not dead, because it was never alive to begin with, because it's an illusion, a trick. And even as she's saying that, they keep fighting. And all this is happening. And everything's the Elspeth is on the floor, defeated, and she's still fighting all of the stuff that Ashiok is doing. But then Ashiok says, "You are quite the canvas indeed, Mother of Machines. Another masterpiece." And Ashiok disappears, gliding through the night sky. And the nightmare lifts with Ashiok's departure. The Phyrexians dissipate, the broken flagstones resolve back into their immaculate smoothness. Everything is the way it should be. The body of Elspeth is the last thing to fade, and as she's looking at it, Elspeth's armor quaked and crumbled away fine as white sand, leaving her severed human head. The skin cracked, lines thin as a wisp of smoke formed around her mouth, spreading outward, dissolving her nightmare flesh into the inside out. But just before the vision of Elspeth disintegrated, she opened her eyes and met Norn's gaze. She looked at Norn with such human pity, with such horrid sympathy, that Norn couldn't breathe. When the nightmare had well and truly faded from the world, Elesh Norn walked carefully over the courtyard of the basilica and touched the stones, clean now, pure and holy, where the thing that had been Elspeth Tyrell had been birthed. She knew then, with the same amount of conviction with which she worshipped the machine orthodoxy, that in order to purge this new emotion, fear, and certainty, she would need to find the human Elspeth Tyrell and rid the multiverse of her. That's how it ends.
That was amazing.
So my initial theory that Ashiok would be Phyrexianized, I'm super hoping that is not the case now. Because seeing Ashiok as a real and true hero, like, I know they're chaotic, but definitely a chaotic, but chaotic neutral, I think would be the best way to describe them. But having them fill a hero role, I would love that. That would be so good.
I just imagine the Gaywatch just like, do we have him taken out? I don't know.
Ashiok
Will they?
That's what Ashiok wants. Hey, Ashiok, would you like... Ashiok disappears. Was this whole thing a nightmare? Did we not even fight the Phyrexians?
Oh, that's going to be amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with the story of New Capenna. Go ahead and leave a like if you like the video, and subscribe if you're afraid of that human Elspeth. Because somebody is, and they're not supposed to feel fear.